Please rise for the presentation of colors by the Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University Naval ROTC Color Guard in the National Anthem, sung by Angela Beth Perdue.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watch were so gallantly streaming, and the rockets red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say, does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
Ladies and gentlemen, please have a seat and welcome today's Master of Ceremonies, former CNN space correspondent and award-winning journalist, Mr. John Zarella.
Welcome, everyone. It's spectacular to see all of you here this morning. You folks up there, you doing all right? Good, good. We like it. That's a full house. I always know how many people are here by looking up there. It's a full house up there. It's a full house here. This is terrific. First, thanks to the Color Guard and to Angela Beth Perdue. It is a privilege to serve again as your Master of Ceremony for the 2024 United States Astronaut Hall of Fame induction. We're here to honor two distinguished space explorers who each have outstanding careers and have made incredibly significant contributions to NASA and the world. Combined roles: they've spent more than 75 days in space, serving in different positions throughout their illustrious careers. Today, we induct two astronaut heroes into the U.S. Astronaut Hall of Fame, David Hilmers and Marsha Ivins. Together, they comprise the 25th class of astronauts to be inducted into the Hall of Fame, bringing the total number of astronauts in this prestigious society to 109. Before we move on, I would like to recognize the many distinguished guests who have joined us today. As I say your name, please stand up and wave to the audience. NASA Administrator Bill Nelson. I think Bill's in the back. Kennedy Space Center's Director, Center Engagement and Business Integration Services, Kim Carter. Kim? Johnson Space Center's Associate Director for Vision and Strategy, Dr. Douglas Terrier. Among our distinguished guests are, of course, as you would expect, a number of astronauts. Please welcome Ellen Baker, Andrew Allen, Wendy Lawrence, Jim J.R. Riley, Kay Heyer, where's Kay? Rick Mastracchio, my paisan, Joan Higginbotham, Shane Kimbrough, and Nicole Stott. Nicole. Also here to celebrate the outstanding accomplishments of our inductees are a few of their predecessors, other fearless explorers who have deepened our understanding of space through their brave endeavors and have since taken their place in the United States Astronaut Hall of Fame. I would like to recognize them now. They will pause for a moment in front of the stage before taking their seats. He piloted STS-1 Columbia, the very first space shuttle mission. He went on to command 3 more missions and later served as director of NASA's Kennedy Space Center, Robert Crippen. He was selected by NASA in 1978 as part of the first group of Space Shuttle astronauts and a veteran of 5 space flights. Logged more than 140 days in space, Norm Thagard. Logging more than 500 hours in space on 3 missions. This pilot and commander also led the Space Shuttle Orbiter return to flight team following the Challenger tragedy. Brewster Shaw. He piloted the first shuttle flight to land on Kennedy Space Center's runway, then went on to command 4 more flights, including the first shuttle mission to dock with the Russian space station Mir, Robert Hoot Gibson. A veteran of 3 space flights, he logged a total of 411 hours in space, including 10 hours of EVA flight time, and served as the astronaut office representative in the Space Shuttle Extravehicular Mobility Unit development effort. George Pinky Nelson, an accomplished fighter pilot who dedicated 25 years to military service. He orbited Earth 319 times as a mission specialist on STS-51C, 61A, 29, and 48, flying with a still classified military payload, conducting science and research, and deploying NASA satellites. Jim Buckley. Jim? She's a veteran of 3 space shuttle missions, including 2 Space Lab flights. This medical doctor ultimately logged more than 722 hours in space during her astronaut career. Dr. Ray Seddon. She's a veteran of 5 space flights, serving as a mission specialist and payload commander throughout her astronaut career. She has logged more than 1,208 hours in space and served as assistant director to the NASA Johnson Space Center with a focus on university research. Dr. Bonnie Dunbar. Selected by NASA in May of 1980, he is a veteran of 7 space flights on which he logged more than 1,601 hours in space, including 19 hours and 31 minutes in 3 spacewalks. Franklin Chang Diaz. A veteran of 4 space flights, including the first Hubble Space Telescope servicing mission and the maiden flight of Space Shuttle Endeavour. She has logged 975 hours in space and more than 21 hours during spacewalks. Kathy Thornton. He is a veteran of 4 space flights, serving as pilot of 2 and commander for 2, ultimately logging 38 days in space. He's the former center director right here in NASA's Kennedy Space Center and former associate administrator for NASA, Robert Cabana. He was the 2nd American commander of the International Space Station and completed the first night landing of the Space Shuttle at Kennedy Space Center. He was the commander of the ISS during the attacks on 9/11. Frank Culbertson. He is a veteran of 6 space flights, during which he logged more than 1,380 hours, or 57 days in space. He also served as commander of STS-95, John Glenn's historic return to space. Kurt Brown. He is a veteran of 4 space shuttle missions and the author of 4 space and aviation books. He's currently a senior research scientist at the Florida Institute of Human and Machine Cognition. There's an asteroid belt named in his honor. Tom Jones. You don't just get an asteroid, you get the whole stinking belt named after you? Jeez. She's a veteran of 4 space flights, logging more than 35 days in space.
She first made history in 1995 when she took the controls of Discovery on STS-63 to become the first woman space shuttle pilot. She again made history as commander of Columbia on STS-93 and as the commander of STS-114, the return to flight mission in 2005. Eileen Collins. This five-time shuttle veteran has logged more than 58 days in space. He conducted 8 spacewalks, totaling 58 hours and 30 minutes on 3 different missions to repair the Hubble Space Telescope. John Grunsfeld. He's served in various roles at the Johnson Space Center and NASA headquarters, piloted 2 space shuttle missions, and commanded 2 more, including STS-125, the 5th and final servicing mission for the Hubble Space Telescope. In total, he spent 51 days in space. Scott Altman. She is a veteran of 3 space flights, serving as a mission specialist on STS-91, STS-99, and STS-104. She has logged more than 33 days in space, traveling more than 13.1 million miles on 535 Earth orbits. Janet Kavandi. Thank you to all our distinguished astronauts who have taken the time to join us today. Let's have one more round of applause for our U.S. Astronaut Hall of Fame astronauts.
Now, before we move on with the ceremony, I'd like to take a moment to pay tribute to the astronauts who have passed away since our last induction. Astronaut Frank Borman led the first team of American astronauts to circle the moon on Apollo 8. He also commanded Gemini 7, the world's first space rendezvous mission. He served on the Fire Investigation Board for Apollo 1 and headed the team to re-engineer the spacecraft. He is a member of the United States Astronaut Hall of Fame. General Thomas P. Stafford piloted Gemini 6 and commanded Gemini 9 and Apollo 10. He was commander of the renowned Apollo-Soyuz test project. General Stafford was Deputy Director of Flight Crew Operations at the NASA Manned Spaceflight Center. He is a member of the Astronaut Hall of Fame. Astronaut Thomas Ken Mattingly II was a veteran of 3 space flights, command module pilot of Apollo 16, and commander of STS-4 and STS-51C. He was the astronaut representative in development of the Apollo spacesuit and backpack. He is a member of the United States Astronaut Hall of Fame. Astronaut and NASA's 8th administrator, Richard Truly, was one of the first military astronauts selected for the Air Force's Manned Orbiting Laboratory program. Truly served as pilot for Space Shuttle Enterprise and STS-2 and commanded Space Shuttle Challenger. He is a member of the Astronaut Hall of Fame. Astronaut Carol Bo Bobko flew on 3 spaceflight missions as pilot of STS-6, the maiden flight of Challenger, and commander of STS-51D and 51J, the first flights of Atlantis. He logged more than 386 hours in space. He is a member. Astronaut Mary Cleave was the first woman to serve as Associate Administrator for NASA's Science Mission Directorate. She was mission specialist for STS-61B and STS-30, logging more than 10 days in space, orbiting the Earth 172 times, and traveling 3.94 million miles. Please bow your heads to observe a moment of silence. Thank you. Now, here to say a few words on behalf of the Kennedy Space Center Visitor Complex is Chief Operating Officer and my good friend, Theron Protze.
Thank you, John. Oh, by the way, John, in April, we had an event, and John called me out that I did not renew his annual pass. So in order to reconcile that issue, John, here's your annual pass. I do want to point out we use his driver's license photo, so it's
It was supposed to be a lifetime pass.
yeah. And we'll talk later. Do some in-kind speaking for us, John. Have a little fun there. True American heroes, no doubt. Welcome and thanks everyone for joining us here at Kennedy Space Center Visitor Complex. It is our honor to host today's ceremony to welcome NASA's astronauts David Hilmers and Marsha Ivins into the U.S. Astronaut Hall of Fame. It is an exciting time here as we continue to tell the NASA story with sensational new additions like a brand new entry experience for our guests, a 3,000 square foot video display that tells the story of NASA past, present, and the exciting future, with attention-grabbing technology that makes the images appear as they leap off the screen, especially when the astronaut comes away from the ISS. It's amazing. The inspiring video features President John F. Kennedy's famous "We Choose to Go to the Moon" speech, as well as iconic artifacts that guests encounter during their visit. Hopefully you had a chance to enjoy it a few minutes today. And John, we will not be streaming the Super Bowl as you asked later on. So we also have more additions, 2 new virtual reality attractions, Hyperdeck, Mission Moon, and Blue Origin's New Shepard virtual spaceflight experience bring to life space travel in a realistic and fun way. Inside our Heroes and Legends, featuring the U.S. Astronaut Hall of Fame, presented by Boeing, you can find a new exhibit featuring trailblazers throughout NASA space history who have inspired millions of people. On the horizon, we're creating something marvelous at the gantry at LC-39. We'll allow the guests to learn about nature preserve around the KSC and visit a brand new educational exhibit called the Earth Information Center. Today is also a special day. NASA astronauts Butch Wilmore and Sonny Williams are set to launch aboard Boeing Starliner spacecraft atop a United Launch Alliance Atlas V rocket at 12:25 p.m. today, and we wish them great success and Godspeed. So let's hope for that, because that's a heck of a day. Heck of a day. So thank you and congratulations to this year's inductees. And now I'd like to welcome Kurt Brown, Chair of the Astronaut Scholarship Foundation, to say a few words. Kurt, you're a man in your own. The man, the myth, the legend. And a heck of a body man, too, from a Camaro standpoint.
Can I get in on that lifetime pass to the thing? I mean, since we're giving out free passes to Zarella, really. But wow, what a group. A lot of people here. Thank you all for coming out. Thank you, Theron, again for the introduction, and thank you all for being here with this very momentous occasion, if I could only talk here. As chairman of the Astronaut Scholarship Foundation and a fellow astronaut, it brings me great joy to be here among so many friends from the astronaut community, along with all our friends from the Kennedy Space Center here today to celebrate the induction of Dave Hilmers and Marsha Ivins into the United States Astronaut Hall of Fame. In addition to establishing the Astronaut Scholarship Foundation to keep America at the forefront of technology, the Mercury 7 astronauts believe there should be a permanent place to showcase the accomplishments of America's space pioneers. This dream translated into reality as the United States Astronaut Hall of Fame was created in 1990 and continues to live on in the Heroes and Legends featuring the U.S. Astronaut Hall of Fame presented by Boeing here at the Kennedy Space Center Visitor Complex. Thanks to the partnership with NASA and the Delaware North folks, as well as the support of corporations and individual supporters, the Astronaut Scholarship Foundation has reached an important milestone this year. We are celebrating our 40th anniversary. ASF awards merit-based scholarships to the best and brightest students across the country and is known nationwide for being among the largest monetary scholarships awarded to undergraduate STEM students. This year, we're so proud we are set to award, or we have awarded 71 astronaut scholars, and since our inception, ASF has awarded more than $9 million in scholarships and more than 800 of the nation's top scholars. Now here's the fun part. We're extremely proud of our scholars and their accomplishments. In fact, we have a small group of our astronaut scholars recipients with us here today. Scholars, this is an order now. You have to stand up. Please stand up and be recognized. Now you have to sit back down. Now I have the very distinct honor to welcome Dave Hilmers and Marsha Ivins into the U.S. Astronaut Hall of Fame. And again, thank you. And it's my honor to introduce Kim Carter, Kennedy Space Center's Director, Center Engagement and Business Integration Services, to the stage. Kim?
Good morning. It is a pleasure to be here today and share this incredible work taking place at Kennedy Space Center, as we honor two extraordinary people whose work has added so much to the legacy of our center and our agency. For more than 6 decades, Kennedy has been launching the missions that have changed how we live on our planet and what we know about our universe. And our spaceport is committed to supporting creativity and innovation for decades to come. This last year at Kennedy, we saw 72 launches from the Eastern Range. And the Spaceport's 2024 launch manifest currently supports over 100 launches, more than triple what we saw 3 years ago. Absolutely, thank you. That's brilliant. While the history of our center is inspiring, the work ahead of us is opening the door to a universe of new discoveries. Through the Artemis, NASA will be returning humans to the moon for the first time in more than a half of a century. In the early morning hours of November the 16th, 2022, Artemis 1 lifted off this historical launch pad 39B. The successful 25-day mission was the first in a series that will send humans back to the moon as humanity learns to live and work in deep space, paving the way for exploration deeper into our universe. Building on the success for Artemis 1, Artemis 2 crewed test flight is targeting September 2025. To test the SLS, rocket, and Orion crew capsule ahead of launching the first woman, the first person of color, and the first non-American on lunar surface, creating opportunities for more science and inspiration than ever before. In support of a sustained human presence in deep space, Gateway Deep Space Logistics is based here at Kennedy Space Center and leading the development of humanity's supply chain to the moon, including procuring services for transporting cargo, equipment, consumables, to enable exploration to the lunar surface and beyond. Now, closer to home in the International Space Station, Kennedy is supporting a number of programs that are innovating for the benefit of those on our planet. NASA's Commercial Crew Program has led the development of the next generation of human-rated commercial spacecraft carrying astronauts to the International Space Station. NASA and our SpaceX partners recently launched the 8th operational crew rotation to the space station. And we're looking forward to the crewed test flight of Boeing Starliner in just a couple of hours. Kennedy's Launch Services Program procures launch services for science and technology payloads ranging from small satellites to NASA's large missions by working with various launch providers. The program helps NASA achieve its scientific and exploration goals efficiently and cost-effectively. NASA is known for setting and accomplishing audacious goals. When President John F. Kennedy made his famous address to Congress, summoning the nation to work together to send a man to to the moon and return him safely to Earth, it was the stuff of science fiction. That appeal drew a line in the sand, challenging our country to look beyond what seemed impossible and to rally together to do what no one had ever done before. Today, we stand on the other side of that figurative line, knowing what is possible and pushing even further. And as we enter a new era of space exploration, Kennedy is not just launching rockets, we are launching humanity's future. Today is a historical day that we are sharing all together. Congratulations to today's inductees, and thank you. And now I will pass it to Mr. Zarella.
Thank you, Kim.
You know, where's Kurt? Kurt, if you want one of those annual passes, I know a guy. We can get it taken care of this afternoon. Thank you all. Ladies and gentlemen, it is now time to begin the induction of the 25th class of astronauts into the United States Astronaut Hall of Fame. The 2024 inductees were selected by a committee of current Hall of Fame astronauts, former NASA officials, historians, and journalists. The process is administered by the Astronaut Scholarship Foundation. To be eligible, now pay attention, an astronaut must have made his or her first flight at least 15 years before the induction. Candidates must be U.S. citizens and either a NASA-trained Space Shuttle commander, pilot, mission specialist, or an International Space Station commander or flight engineer who has orbited the Earth at least once and whose last day eligible for flight assignment as a NASA astronaut was at least 5 years prior to nomination. You got that? I'm not going over it again. Our first inductee is David Hilmers.
Mission Specialist Hilmers and Stewart.
As a mission control, Houston, solar on station here in the mission control center. In progress of the count and monitoring the condition of the vehicle. All systems on Atlantis up here we go at time.
And go for main engine start. T-minus 6. We have main engine start. 4, 3, 2, 1. Ignition and liftoff. Liftoff of Atlantis. A new orbiter joins the shuttle fleet and it has cleared the tower.
Touchdown main gear. Is now exiting the shuttle. The rest of the crew now shaking hands with the convoy.
I wish we had some Beach Boys music to run for you.
On behalf of the Challenger families and all of us down here, it sure does feel good to see the Challenger mission continue and America back in space. And the crew of Discovery now coming down, waving a large American flag. On the runway 17, here at the Dryden Flight Research Facility, Vice President George Bush.
I've got Mission Specialist David Hilmers being assisted with his helmet. 3, 2, 1, 0. Ignition and liftoff of Atlantis and mission STS-36.
To another mission specialist, David Hilmers. And liftoff of the Space Shuttle Discovery and the first International Microgravity Laboratory.
Discovery now flying free of the boosters and under the power of its own main propulsion system.
Roger, Discovery, and welcome back. Your mission has given us a preview of space station operations and a look at the international cooperation that will be a part of future space exploration.
Please welcome David Hilmers.
Here to present David Hilmers for induction into the United States Astronaut Hall of Fame is astronaut Norm Thagard. Norm?
Well, that introduction made my job easier. My original thought was this was going to be one of the most difficult things I ever did, because Colonel Dr. David C. Hilmers is a pretty incredible individual. And my concern was, no matter how convincing I might try to be, those of you who don't know Dave would say, you're exaggerating. The easy part is I don't have to exaggerate, because what I'm going to tell you is pretty incredible in its own right. You heard a lot of, or saw a lot of his background from the screen, but just let me elaborate on it a little bit. He graduated from high school in '68. He was a triple sport athlete in football, track, and basketball. Did that hurt his grade point average? Probably not. He graduated as valedictorian of his high school class. In 1972, you saw he graduated from Cornell College in Iowa. He was again a triple sport athlete, this time in football, track, and wrestling. Well, did that hurt his grade point average? Probably not. When he got his Bachelor of Arts in mathematics, he graduated summa cum laude. And as you know, that is the highest grouping for graduates. Also during that time, he was an undergraduate. He was going to Marine officer training in the summers, I would imagine, at Quantico. And he was commissioned as second lieutenant when he did graduate. And it is noteworthy that he was sent to flight training, where he became a bombardier navigator in the A-6 attack aircraft. But the Marine Corps saw right away how smart he was, and they sent him to Monterey, California, to the Naval Postgraduate School, where in 1977, he received a Master of Science with distinction in electrical engineering. I guess he couldn't decide what it was he wanted to be in life. In 1978, he received a doctoral level degree, electrical engineer. 2 years later, he is one of 19 members of the 9th group of NASA astronaut selectees. You saw his missions, and in fact, it was October of 85, and I want to emphasize the October 85. He was on that DoD mission, which was STS-51J. He did a lot of important things on the mission, but if he were to tell you about any of those things, since it was a classified Department of Defense mission, he would then have to shoot you. Why did I emphasize the fact that it was in October? Because he had an assignment for STS-61F, the Ulysses Centaur mission, that was supposed to launch on 15 May of 1986. There are not many astronauts who have been assigned to fly their second mission less than 8 months after they fly their first mission. And that just tells you that NASA astronaut program and its officers and executives recognized his talents and his abilities. That Ulysses Centaur mission was going to send the Ulysses probe off to Jupiter, where it was going to use gravitational assist to go into polar orbit perpendicular to the planetary orbital plane around the sun, where it would do science research on the north and south poles of the sun. The problem we had with the Centaur, the booster, the very powerful Centaur booster, was all those thousands of pounds of liquid hydrogen and oxygen in the Centaur booster that sat in the payload bay. We were so concerned with that risk that within the astronaut office, we fondly referred to the Centaur as the Death Star. Rick Houck, his commander, was so concerned about the risk that he went to Dave and the rest of the crew, and he said that if any of you guys want to get off of this flight, I'll support you. Now, I was the MS-1 for the Galileo Centaur mission, and I have to tell you this, and this will sound astounding too, they were going to launch on 15 May of '86, and we were going to launch on 20 May of '86 off the other pad. And because of the reputation of the Centaur, I one day went to Dave and I said, you think if you guys blow up, they'll still go ahead and launch us 5 days later? That was kind of the humor you saw in Vietnam among fighter pilots. I remember one coming up to me one day and saying, if you get shot down, can I have your stereo? So we were used to that kind of stuff. Anyhow, after the Challenger accident, NASA reevaluated the risk of flying a Centaur on a shuttle, and they canceled the mission, postponed it, and redesigned it to be sent by a solid rocket booster. The thing of it is, because I was the MS-1 on the Galileo Centaur, and he was a mission specialist on the Ulysses, we did a lot of our training together. We weren't on the same crew, but 5 days apart, a lot of our training was in parallel. What I realized in that is he is one of the smartest people I have ever met. No joke. Anyhow, with the cancellation or the postponement of the Galileo or the Ulysses Centaur mission, Dave was reassigned to STS-26, and you saw that. We call that in the office the return to flight because it was the very first shuttle flight after the Challenger accident. I think it was 29 September of '88. You folks launched this time on the would have been the Discovery, right? Yeah. And they launched a TDRS-3, which was a communications satellite. Then in 1990, I think it was February of 1990, he launched on STS-36, which was another DoD mission. This time, I guess somebody didn't keep their mouth shut, and it was actually rumored that they launched a reconnaissance satellite. The interesting thing is Dave also has the experience of being on the shuttle that ever achieved the highest orbital inclination of any shuttle flight. By using this unique dogleg maneuver post-SRB SEP, they achieved a 62-degree orbital inclination. Normally, the highest the shuttle could achieve was 57 degrees. Again, he can't really tell you, or he would have to shoot you, so we won't go into that. On 5 April of 1991, Dr. Sonny Carter, Navy physician and test pilot, was killed on Atlantic Southeast Airlines Flight 2311 out of Atlanta that crashed on approach to Brunswick, Georgia. Sonny was killed on that flight there were 23 people. Former Texas Senator John Tower was killed on that. And sad to say, one young little boy and girl were also killed. Now that created a problem for me and my commander on STS-42, the first International Microgravity Lab mission. And the reason it did is because the rest of us had a year and a half to train for that flight, and it was a complex flight. We had 55 experiments from investigators in 11 different countries. Now we're 9 months from launch. We launched on 22 January of 1996. What are we going to do? We've got to get somebody there who can train in that half the time the rest of us are having on this complex science flight. I thought of Dave, and as the payload commander, I told Ron Gravy, our commander, that Dave is the guy we need. Now that sounds, you got a Marine colonel, right? And we're going to put him in on this science flight with half the time to train. Why would you do that? Because we already knew that he could do that. Well, here's the other thing. Dave had decided after his third flight that he was going to go to medical school. And we went to Dave to ask him if he would succeed Sonny and fly that flight with us, and he agreed. He did point out that it might have some impediment to him taking the medical college admission test. But he stayed with us, and I will say, while he's training with half the time we had for a complex mission, he was bored, so he decided he would take night courses in organic chemistry and biology because they were medical school prerequisites. Okay, so we launch, and we get up there, and Dave with Ulf Mirbo was on one of the 12-hour shifts that we had, because we were 24-hour ops, and with Roberta Bondar, the Canadian woman astronaut, I was on the other two-person 12-hour shift. We had 55 experiments, as I said, from 11 different countries, and we had one failure. And that was in a crystal growing experiment, and that crystal had already formed before we ever launched. So what do I have to say to that? Ron and I agreed that Dave performed exactly as we had expected him to perform, perfectly. Dave?
Well, thanks, Norm. I've known Norm for over 40 years now, and I think this is the first time I'll have the last word. I'm not sure I have a lot to say after Norm spoke, but thanks to each one of you for coming today, friends, family, and distinguished guests. And I should say thanks to Boeing and to NASA for scheduling the launch, being kind enough to schedule the launch today for us. But what an incredible honor it is for me to be remembered and inducted into the Hall of Fame. It's really humbling to read the list of astronauts who have been selected before me and all these that are here today. And I'm sure that there are many former astronauts that are also here today that deserve this honor much more than I do. And it's particularly gratifying that I'm so honored against being right below Atlantis. I was on board Atlantis when it blasted into the sky for the very first time on a beautiful October day in 1985. Our crew had the opportunity to see her as she was being built at the Rockwell plant in Palmdale, California. And then when she was delivered to the Kennedy Space Center in April 1985 for processing. She was gleaming like a shiny new car as we went out to the launch pad. It was my very first flight as well, and I was bursting with anticipation to get a space flight under my belt and become a real astronaut. This was before the Challenger accident, and you might have seen on the video that instead of getting into our familiar orange pressure suits that we flew for the first time on my next flight, STS-26, we walked out of the crew quarters and got into the crew bus in our light blue flight suits. When we got out to the pad, the Cape Crusaders, and Marsha was there, and she helped strap us in and get into our survival vests. and get into our seats. So I was out there on the pad, and I was sitting on my back for about 5 minutes, and I turned to the astronaut next to me, Bob Stewart, said, hey Bob, this isn't really very comfortable being out here on the launch pad at all. And he agreed with me. So we actually unstrapped, did a little flip, and sat on the back of the seats until it got to the 9-minute hold. And finally, when we came out of the hold, our commander, Bo Bobko, told us that, you know, it might be a good idea to get strapped back in. And so we, of course, did that. I'll have to say that that was a much more comfortable countdown and launch that I had on subsequent flights, such as STS-36, where we had a couple launch delays and we're out on the pad for 2.5 hours before we scrubbed the launch. So Atlantis performed like a champ on that mission. It was really a clean vehicle and had very few anomalies during the whole flight. So any problems that we had were really attributed to my own rookie mistakes, like flailing around the cabin, figuring out how to eat, sleep, and go to the bathroom without making a mess or bothering others on the crew. Atlantis also performed admirably on my third mission in space, STS-36. As Norm mentioned, we were able to get up to a very high inclination of 62.1 degrees, which took us right up the East Coast on launch. The low altitude and the high inclination gave us unmatched viewing opportunities of the Earth. And I believe on one of Marsha's missions, she had a very low altitude as well, making for great photo ops, and knowing Marsha, she took great advantage of that. Throughout it all, Atlantis never let me down, and it's amazing to be standing below her on this occasion. Although she's retired, she continues to be on duty, giving many thousands of visitors the opportunity to see what it was like to be on board. Like Atlantis, I too retired from active duty with NASA and started a new mission. My path took me down an entirely different direction, and this is actually the first time I've returned to the Kennedy Space Center for over 3 decades. But memories of those years at NASA, the accomplishments of the Space Shuttle program, the relationships that were made, the teamwork, and indeed those who gave their lives to achieve the dream of going into space are never far from my mind. I was so fortunate to be able to carry the baton during my time as an astronaut, and it was clear to me when it was time to pass it along to the next generation. I am so humbled that you have remembered me after all these years and that you feel that my contributions are somehow worthy of recognition. It is our job, yours and mine, to make sure that the dream of space exploration never dies, that there is always a new generation, our astronaut scholars, to whom to pass the torch, a generation with the necessary skills, determination, and education to carry out our mission. I thank each one of you, not only for the honor that you've bestowed on me today, but also for the support that ensures that the dream of space exploration will always stay alive. Thank you very much, and go Starliner.
Congratulations, Dave. You know, 3 decades, you haven't been back here in 3 decades? You know, you're way behind on your Astronaut of the Day appearances here. You do realize that. And we can get you an annual pass just like we're getting Kurt. And now it's time to introduce our second candidate for induction into the U.S. Astronaut Hall of Fame, Marsha Ivins.
Three, 2, 1, 0. Booster ignition and liftoff at Columbia. A new decade of spaceflight begins.
The Columbia very shortly will pass over the coast of the southern tip of the African continent.
Marsha Ivins, the flight engineer, and liftoff of the Space Shuttle Atlantis on a mission for new utility in space. Marsha Ivins, primary person for photo and television documentation of the Eureka and TSS operations.
We have created this wiring nightmare here that allows me to record on three recorders, the basic orbiter recorder, which we're only using if we need three sources. I record from one monitor onto the camcorder, and I record onto this little kiosk. So far, it's working really well.
Marsha Ivins sees herself on NASA Select TV. And liftoff of the Space Shuttle Columbia as NASA continues on the cutting edge of microgravity research. It's quite popular amongst the astronaut corps. She's making her fourth flight into space. Marsha Ivins, who will be our flight engineer, will be operating the robotic arm.
2, 1, 0, and liftoff of Space Shuttle Atlantis with Destiny.
EVAs, 2 astronauts outside. She'll be attaching the U.S. laboratory Destiny to the space station using that robotic arm.
It's a big lab and it's a small bay and there wasn't much room in there, but coming out was easy. The arms performed flawlessly.
Please welcome Marsha Ivins. To present Marsha Ivins for induction in the Hall of Fame, astronaut John Grunsfeld. John?
Well, thanks all for coming here. And I will try and keep it brief because I'm keeping you all between this and launch. Today is our opportunity to celebrate the human element of spaceflight. You know, we have the wonderful Atlantis that Marsha and I flew on above us, but in the end, it's a human spaceflight experience. Even the science flights that we fly, after all, are still about people. You know, I often have said that, you know, we have wonderful rovers on Mars, and they haven't discovered anything. Scientists on Earth discover things using those rovers. And our spaceflight program really is about humans going beyond the surface of the Earth and our future. I'm really thrilled and honored to introduce to you Marsha Ivins, our new Astronaut Hall of Fame member, and congratulations to David, and my favorite Martian. Now, many of you think this is about Marsha and David, but actually it's all about Kurt in the end. And I just want to give Kurt a thanks for being the chairman of the board of the Astronaut Scholarship Foundation and all the work that he does tirelessly to help our great astronaut scholars. Some of you may know that Kurt was my commander on STS-103, so I have to suck up to him. Marsha Ivins is a maggot. And that's the class name of the 10th group of astronauts selected in 1984. You'll have to ask her how that happened. She, as you know, she flew on 5 space shuttle missions. She's a native of Pennsylvania, graduated from the University of Colorado. I live in Boulder now, in aerospace engineering. And if you think back to the late 1970s, or 1970s, very few women went into aerospace engineering. So that was a pretty adventurous thing for Marsha to do, but already you must know that she's a very adventurous person. At NASA, she began her career as an engineer in the human factors field, which at that time was called man-machine engineering. And so all of us who flew on the space shuttle owe her a debt of gratitude for work that she did in helping to arrange and engineer the controls and displays and the heads-up display on the space shuttle, which gives the commander guidance, pilot and commander guidance on entry. And from that launch pad, she then became a NASA pilot. And she was already a very experienced pilot, flying, you know, a number of airplanes. She has airplane, flight instructor, glider ratings, and talking to her a little while ago, she used to tow banners as well. I won't tell you, what was on the banners or how you would pick up those banners. It's too scary. Much scarier than riding on a space shuttle. But a very accomplished pilot with thousands of hours. And she was also type-rated and a pilot in the NASA Gulfstream 1 aircraft, which is one of my favorites. It's a twin turboprop aircraft. And with that rating, she shares with Wernher von Braun, who I'm told loved to fly that aircraft. Marsha is not an attention seeker. In fact, when Kurt called her to announce that she was selected into the Astronaut Hall of Fame, I think she had some reticence about this whole event and being in front of the camera, because she much prefers to be behind the camera. And she is an incredibly expert and talented photographer, something that I really appreciated when I flew with her on STS-81, learned a great deal from her. And virtually I think all of the photos that you see from astronauts, some part of those photos come from Marsha's expertise in helping NASA select cameras, lenses, film. If anybody wants to know what film is, I can explain that later. But she shepherded that photography program, all through the entire space shuttle and most of the International Space Station program, and we owe her a debt of gratitude for that. on orbit, she helped to make IMAX films. I was lucky enough to make an IMAX film with Scott Altman and others on Hubble called Hubble 3D. She made a film called, most recent film called ISS 3D, and we worked with a wonderful, wonderful producer-director named Tony Myers, who's a dear friend of both of ours. She passed away, sadly, recently. But Marsha was pivotal in many of the IMAX films that you may see about the Space Shuttle program, and to that we all owe her a debt of gratitude. I flew with Marsha on STS-81 on Atlantis up to the Mir space station. She was in charge of all the logistics, the thousands of pounds of food, water, supplies, tools, experiments that went up to the Mir. And she leveraged her role that she helped, I think, everybody here in the logistics of stowage on the space shuttle, one of her roles. And at every bench review, I would see Marsha. Bench review is where you get to see all of the things that are going into the shuttle. It's in Houston, so that you can play with them and check out pip pins and look for sharp edges and things. And for my flights, Marsha was always there, even when we weren't flying together. And we all owe her a debt of gratitude. She also helped, as you heard, strap David Hilmers in. She was a Cape Crusader, the astronaut support personnel that is at the Cape to support us prior to launch and straps us in. They're the last ones that we see. And, she just was phenomenal and knew the shuttle inside and out. And for that, we also owe her a debt of gratitude. Of all her talents, though, I think the one that nearly all astronauts appreciate the most is that she is the Chief Executive Office Chairman, Chief Cook, and only person in the Ivins Bakery. She is famous to astronauts and astronaut families for her wonderful cookies and cakes. I have incredibly fond memories and a little bit of weight from cookies that we ate in quarantine prior to launch, and our families would get cakes on the way back on the aircraft from launch. And Butch Wilmore and Sonny Williams going to orbit today almost certainly have a little bit of Ivins Bakery in their gut today. Marsha flew her fifth flight to the ISS, operating the Canada arm to install the U.S. laboratory on the space station, which looked like it would be incredibly difficult, and she made it look easy, as she has done with all of her efforts in space. Afterwards, she became the first chief of the first exploration branch in the astronaut office, and this is at a time where NASA leadership wasn't really talking about going beyond the International Space Station, and she knew, she had a vision that we would be going beyond the International Space Station to the moon and eventually to Mars. And that's now called the Artemis program, and so she really is one of the founders of our Moon to Mars program. It was a small group. It included myself and Scott Horowitz and Mark Kelly, and I really enjoyed working with her in that. I would say that we were a bit controversial, and Marsha, not wanting to be in the limelight, still helped push NASA forward, without revealing all of her qualities in a way that was problematic. But of all the qualities about Marsha Ivins, perhaps the one that I appreciate the most and have appreciated most over the years is that she has a very precise and extremely accurate BS meter. And if anybody in the audience needs me to explain the BS acronym, ask somebody else. But Marsha is a dear colleague, a dear, dear friend, my favorite Martian, and now Hall of Fame astronaut. Marsha?
Thank you, John. I'm glad both John and Dave took a moment to acknowledge Atlantis here. If you haven't, please look up and acknowledge this piece of human history that you are sitting under today. My most uncomfortable place, of course, is the center of anyone's attention. As John said, I'm way more comfortable behind the lens than in front of it, but I am flattered and humbled by the amazingly kind and in some cases accurate words. And because we have a way more important moment in human history sitting on the launch pad right now, my remarks will be very brief. There are a lot of people I can thank and would like to acknowledge and remember. I'd like to thank the Astronaut Scholarship Fund and the Hall of Fame members for actually awarding me this honor here. I'd like to thank John Grunsfeld for getting me on the stage in the first place. Your friendship is a gift, and a good way. To Dave Hilmers, it is a privilege really to share a stage with someone I consider one of the finest human beings on or off the planet. I'd like to remember Roger Zwig and Charlie Hayes, the first two of the wolves who raised me. George Abbey for hiring me and for his undying passion and defense of human spaceflight. To John Young for being forever and always John Young. To my maggot class for giving us a very unique identity, and for Shep, if he's here, for giving us the name. To Dan Brandenstein for taking me on my first space flight, and to Lauren Shriver for taking me on my second one anyway. To Ellen Baker for being my person, always. To Sonny and Butch, sitting on the launch pad now, demonstrating why we are all in this room in the first place. And especially to the workforce at the Kennedy Space Center, the most hardworking and inspirational workforce on the planet. Their work ethic gave us, their touch labor work ethic gave us the confidence, everybody sitting in the front row here, to actually get on the rocket. And to the friends that we have lost to human spaceflight and to life. When I was young and optimistic in the life that I would lead and the person I would become stretched out in front of me, and I watched us go from 0 to 25,000 in 8 years, I was worried that we would step from the moon to Mars and beyond that before I ever had the chance to participate in this adventure in space in any way. Now, 60-some years later, I'm saddened by the thought that I may not actually live long enough to see anybody walk on Mars or go beyond. It has been an honor to have had the opportunity to participate in human spaceflight, and to my fellow dinosaurs in the room, it has been a privilege to have done it with you. Thank you.
Congratulations. I will now kindly ask if both newly inducted Astronaut Hall of Famers can proceed, and I think you already have, to the stand next to their plaques. We will do what has become tradition, the grand reveal. As you may know, each inductee into the U.S. Astronaut Hall of Fame is immortalized with a likeness that will soon be housed in Heroes and Legends, featuring the U.S. Astronaut Hall of Fame, presented by Boeing. It is my honor to unveil those displays to you today. You ready for the countdown? 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you the 25th class of the United States Astronaut Hall of Fame, David Hilmers and Marsha Ivins.
Would all the members of the U.S. Astronaut Hall of Fame please join us for a photo?
All right, folks, thank you so very much. It has been an honor to be with you today. On behalf of the Kennedy Space Center Visitor Complex and the Astronaut Scholarship Foundation, thank you for joining us for this historic ceremony. Enjoy the day, enjoy the launch.